So the mother of Khloie Torres, she was the 10-year-old girl who was calling 911 from the classroom as the shooter in Uvalde was going after as many children and maybe even some adults as possible. She's also the same girl who, as many people said wisely, sadly but wisely, was smearing the blood of some of the victims in that classroom on herself to appear dead to avoid being killed. This same child. Her mother's talking to CNN about some of the things that she's been going through ever since. Because listen, we have these news cycles of what's happening with these shootings and horrific nature of the families and people involved, and then we forget after a couple of weeks. Their trauma continues on for the rest of their lives. Let's go to some of the things that she was talking about. Let's jump to this first clip here, you guys.
It's definitely stressed her out, PTSD, like all of that. She has all of that. You know, she can't walk into a restaurant or any kind of building without counting every exit of the door.
Oh, she counts exits?
Yes. If we go to McDonald's, she sits closest to the door that she can.
And do you think it's because she's trying to figure out if this happens again, how am I gonna get out of here?
I know for sure that's what it is.
She's told you that?
She's told me that. She says, if something happens, I gotta make sure I'm in a place where I can either get out or hide or duck down, because the police is gonna take a long time to get here.
Does she ever ask you why the police took so long?
She does. She's like, Mom, why did it take police so long to come in here? I don't even know what to say to her. She don't trust any police now.
Lots of things from the trauma that was experienced by young Khloie. She doesn't trust the police will show up, doesn't know why they didn't show up, and also once they were there, why they didn't do anything. But also anywhere else she goes, she's counting exits, sitting next to other exits and trying to plan her escape. It's something that probably sit with her for the rest of her life, as we then move on and talk about how it's not that much of a big deal. So some of the footage from these officers, body cam footage when they kind of went into the school to stop this shooter, has been released. Specifically, Khloie's mother was asking for that release to see how they interacted with her and anything else that they were doing as they were there. So a few of those details, because it was quite gory. So no, we're not seeing all the things that were happening, but these are some of those descriptions that went into it. So after an hour of doing nothing, the shooter was finally dead and police did move in. The show opens with the sound, this is from Raw Story, guys, they were describing this, with the sound of gunfire from the shooter and from the police. The next scene is a group of officers finally entering that classroom. And what follows is a collection of body camera footage showing officers vomiting outside. Others were sobbing and holding each other. A different video showed an officer shaking while trying to clean blood off of his hands. Again, these are professional law enforcement officers who we would assume see lots of devastating things, traumatic events. And when they see something like this, they're walking out in a panic, vomiting, and also probably trying to erase the images that they saw in their heads, because we like to keep our guns so close to us so that we can shoot each other and destroy each other as much as possible. Here's some of that footage that we were just talking about, though, you guys.
Prepare you for what they brought out. It was horrible.
Wiping the blood off of their hands and not believing what they just saw. Now, the Torres family wanted this stuff released to help quell or maybe even draw some more attention to how horrific these events happen, the aftermath of them are. So maybe these folks who think this is not that much of a big deal might begin to pay attention. The problem here, Burbank, is I think they already know. And then what the situation is that they just don't care.
Yeah, it's like you watch this and you think, clearly the police were not prepared to handle this situation. Would anyone be ready to handle this situation? I think about the training that we put, the US military through. And it's like, do we want our police to have to go through that training? Do we want our police to have military level training to be able to do their job because we have so many mass shootings? That's an awful calculation to try and make. We already spend so much money on police. In Uvalde, they have 1 in 7 people living in poverty, but they're spending $26 million on the police. It makes up 40% of the city's budget. And it's like, are we gonna train folks to respond to mass shootings? Is that a good use of the police force? I don't know, right? Do we wanna give them military grade training? It seems like we need to. It's either we have to do something to prevent mass shootings and address this problem at its root cause, or we're gonna need to train the police to actually respond or have some other form of public safety to respond to mass shootings. And what that young girl said, who was there at Uvalde, I don't trust the police anymore to keep us safe. A lot of people don't call the police when something goes wrong because they know it'll make this situation much worse. And so why is 40% of our budget going to police when people are living in poverty? That's the big question here.
Probably for a false sense of security, similar to the false sense of having a gun on in every room and every dresser possible, so you can protect yourself. I get the protection aspect of it, but when it then leads to just rampant gun violence, you go, well, I need it, despite the fact that folks like this run up in schools and massacre a bunch of children, then you're still behind it. Your name might be similar to this guy. It rhymes with Charlie Kirk. So I want you guys to remember this. So we just listened to the trauma and the PTSD this child is have to go through for the rest of her life. She's a survivor. She's tough. Her dad was a Marine and taught her some of these life-saving skills. A Marine. So a kid has to learn what a Marine had to learn because she lives in America. By the way, I want to remind you guys what Charlie Kirk was saying. Again, I want you guys to remember. Picture a young. I want to make sure I have her name right. Khloie Torres, in the story that she's going through now, versus what Charlie Kirk wants you to believe about that same family.
You have to be real. And of course, our hearts go out to the victims in Kentucky for every one of these situations. But we cannot allow them to emotionally hijack the narrative. You must use reason when you look at these things. And using reason, we're able to make the very simple judgment and argument. A free society comes with a cost, and that cost is worth it. Liberty is worth it.
So to the Torres family, Charlie Kirk says his freedom to hold as many of those AR-15s and AK-47s and anyone else to carry and openly carry those around the streets and murder your children is a fair trade-off for the trauma that you and your child will have to go through for the rest of their lives. It wasn't a slip up because he said something similar before.
I think it's worth it. I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. Having an armed citizenry comes with a price. And that is part of liberty. Driving comes with a price. 50,000 people die on the road every year. That's a price. You get rid of driving, you'd have 50,000 less auto fatalities.
So again, to the Torres family, this is what Charlie Kirk thinks of you. I think it's worth a few gun deaths for me to have this position. What an absolute piece of shit. What's your thoughts here, Jessica?
Yeah, Charlie Kirk saying our heart goes out to them, my heart goes out to them. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Charlie, you wouldn't be saying what you're saying if it went out to them, because when you talk about living in a free society, these are the same people that complain about crime waves and ridiculous violence in New York City when we've seen crime on the decline as reported by the NYPD for the past few months. So they're making up this narrative that crime is so terrible and we have to crack down on crime. But to live in a free society, we have to make ourselves safe, which means safe from mass shooters. We have to take measures to prevent this from happening. If someone's not free to go to school and get an education without risking murder, mass murder of children, how free is that society? That's the question you need to make, or you need to ask. As far as I know, Charlie Kirk's not an anarchist. He believes in government. He believes that we need some kind of structure to keep us safe and have our society function, to provide education for the public and have people be able to go to school without risking literal murder of children while they're trying to get an education. Like, Charlie's not an anarchist. Charlie's heart doesn't go out to these people because all Charlie's thinking about is the NRA money he gets by doing his YouTube show. That's really all it is.
It's worth it to him for that one thing, for that money he can make off of this. We got a couple days until the actual anniversary comes. I just want to continue to give some support and love to the folks who will be dealing with this forever. Because no, I don't think about it every day. I probably think about it once every couple weeks, and then go to a bad place in my brain. But these folks live it every day in all of these shootings. In the shooting where there's one person against the one other person, the family of that victim thinks about it every day.